Hi guys, my name is Ryan Glenn, and I am a life coach. I specialize in small business coaching and mindset coaching. I wanted to record this video, and I wanted to explain a couple things because I've had a couple questions. Now, one of the questions I get a lot is, how did you decide to be a life coach? I've always wanted to help people. I've always been big into psychology and human behavior and things like that. The human brain has always fascinated me. So, of course, with that, I always went in that direction of mental health or something along that line. I've worked in psychiatric institutions. I've worked in pediatric kind of residential services. I've worked in adult residential services. I've spent part of my adult life helping other people with different illnesses and different situations. So life coaching just came naturally to me. Another question I get a lot is, how are you qualified to be a life coach? And that is a good question. But, I always worried about this. I always worried about education. I worried about training and things like that. But once I actually started training, my trainer told me, okay, when you hire a basketball coach, what do you want them to be good at? And of course, naturally, you want them to be good at basketball. The same thing goes with a life coach. You want somebody with life experiences. And unfortunately, in the 32 years that I've been alive, I've had to deal with more than most people will go through in an entire lifetime. And, that's not to brag. And I just wanted to share this, and be just completely open and transparent and just as vulnerable as I could be to share my journey with people and how I came to the realization that I'm supposed to be a life coach. It started when I was a kid. I was born with cerebral palsy. And I was blessed that it was very mild. It only affected my hamstrings and my ACLs and my legs. So for the first, 19 years of my life, I was a toe walker. I would walk on my toes. Basically, I was wearing high heels 24/7, 365. When I was a younger kid in elementary school, I used to have, I called them the Forrest Gump braces, basically a hard plastic shell that I would put on my leg and then strap it to my leg to keep my foot flat. And, I got made fun of a lot for it. On the bus, when on my way to school, I would fall asleep and kids would take my braces off the legs and throw them out the window of the bus. And when I got home, I would be in trouble because I lost my braces because, of course, they weren't cheap. But I got bullied a lot for having my braces. And then, eventually, about around, I think, third grade, I was able to get them taken off. But between third grade and fifth grade, something else happened to me that got a lot of attention and created a lot of, I went through puberty very early. By the end of fifth grade, I was already shaving. I was already growing a beard. And I remember this one kid in particular, he used to always, point out, he's got neck hair. He's got neck hair. Look at that neck hair, and I was so self-conscious about it because none of the other kids in that grade had a beard. None of the other kids had to shave. None of the other kids had neck hair. And, that made me feel like I stood out in a way that I didn't want to stand out. So I got bullied a lot, through the younger years. And then when I went into middle school, I told myself, this isn't the way this is supposed to be. The movies always show these people have friends and they do this and they do that. And, when I went into middle school, I said, you know what? I'm not going to be bullied anymore. I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to be scared of these people anymore. So then I started sticking up for myself, started standing up for myself, which means I started getting into fights. I started things like that. And, at a young age, I still remember my first fight. The kid was 3 times my size. And I kicked his ass. And at that point, I realized, wow, I like to fight. So that bred an entire, lifetime full of problems for me because I was always fighting, and I became a very violent person. And, up until I was 21 years old, I loved to fight. I didn't, it wasn't anything for me to snap, and I was in the middle of a fist fight. But when I was 21 years old, I come to the realization that I don't need to do this anymore. I don't want to be this violent person anymore. When you're a teenager, it's cool to be the tough guy. It's cool to be the guy that, people come and get, and they're like, hey, I need you to go beat this person up. It's cool to do that. And when you're an adult, it's just childish. It seems stupid. So, I took a vow of nonviolence. I wasn't going to do that anymore. No more fist fights. No more yelling at people. No more cussing people out. That's not who I was anymore. And since I was 21 years old, I haven't been in a fist fight. And I feel better now than I did in my entire life. Another thing that I went through that I would not, wish on anyone. When I was 16 years old, I lost my dad in a car accident on his way to work. At 16 years old, that's a vital time in your life. I had just got my driver's license, and then he was gone. I had lost my father that I had for 16 years of my life. At 16 years old, I lost a parent. I lost my father, the breadwinner of the family nonetheless. So, of course, my mother, we struggled, and my mom worked overtime after overtime and 2 jobs. And, as teenagers, we didn't understand. So, in 2010, we began, actually before that, in 2010, we had moved into the house that my father and my family had built with our bare hands. And that was supposed to be our forever home. My dad built a big house, large house, so we could grow as a family. And, there would always be that place that we can come as a family. And, after he passed a couple of years down the road, the house payment got to be too much. We couldn't afford the utilities in that big of a house. So, we lost it. It got foreclosed on. So I had the pain of losing a parent, and then I lose my forever home that we built with our bare hands. We spent years, my entire, middle school years, we spent building this house, and it's gone. And then, right before my oldest daughter was born, my mother came to my house, and she was crying, and she said, I need to talk to you. And I was like, okay, of course, I lost my father at 16, so I figured somebody else had passed away. And it was that night that she told me that who I thought was my father wasn't my biological father. And then she told me the story about my biological father, which I met and I re-met in 2010. And I actually met him face to face in 2011. And, I've built a relationship with him. I gave him that opportunity to come back into my life. And, that wasn't a choice that I took lightly. But, I spoke with my mom about it, for hours and hours and hours. And, she showed me, letters that he had sent to me that, of course, they never given me. And, she showed me court documents from where he went to court and tried to get custody. And, I told myself, he tried for so long just to be a part of my life. The least I can do is give him some kind of, relationship. Even though, really, my dad was my dad. Now, I had my dad that raised me, and I had my biological father. Now, my dad that raised me, nobody's going to replace him. Nobody could even try to replace him. The morals that I had today were instilled in me because of him and my mom. And, my biological father, she told me stories that, when she was in the hospital having me, she had people coming to the hospital while she was in labor with me asking for money that my biological father had borrowed for drugs. And, it's not to talk down on the guy or anything, because he's a great man. I love him to death. My kids love him. We've built that relationship. But as far as father and son go, we can never have that relationship because I spent the first 16 years of my life getting raised by another man that will always be my dad. You know, he was my my hero, my everything. He taught me everything I know. And my biological father understands that. He knows that he messed up. He knows the choices he made led to me getting raised by another man. And he respects that. He knows that my dad was my dad, and that and now he's my biological father. He knows that, and I appreciate that. So, there's these different life events that happen, and this is all things that I can help other people with because these are things that I've lived through. Between getting bullied and then at the age of 19, learning how to walk again. I couldn't walk at the age of 19. I was in a wheelchair for 6 months because I had to have surgery to take a little piece of metal this big and lengthen my heel cord to where I can walk flat on my feet. And, I remember that surgery. I'll remember it the rest of my life. I was working at Domino's Pizza. And I didn't want to stop working. So I was in a wheelchair in the manager's office, answering the phones and taking orders and stuff like that. And then, there would be some days where I would be on the walker with the little knee pad in it, scooting around Domino's, making pizzas, putting them in the oven. And then before you know it, I'm in a walking boot delivering pizzas. I loved to work. And it's something like that. If you can work through that, you can work through anything. So that's, it's all things that come together that can help me help other people. And I'm more than welcome to help people. I'm more than happy to. And, that is the whole, that's the last piece of the puzzle for me. Is just to be able to help people that have been through the shit that I've been through that don't know where to turn. The kids that have gotten bullied and the kids, kids that have physical impairments that get made fun of, or somebody that lost their parent, or somebody that found out that that the person that raised them wasn't their biological parent. This is all situations that cause depression and anxiety and things like that ultimately can lead to suicide. And I strongly believe that this is something that I can help with. This is something that I can help with. So that is why I've become a life coach.